Welcome to the Natural Health Matters podcast, where it's all about maximizing your health potential so that you can look and feel your best at any age. I'm your host, David Sandstrom, naturopathic doctor and biblical health coach, and this is episode number 107. I'd like to add a special welcome to the Overcast listeners. There's been quite a few people subscribing to the show via the Overcast podcast listening app. Welcome. I sure appreciate you. Thank you for following the show. And I hope you're enjoying the content that's out there already. And I'm planning on giving you some really great content in the near future. And I just wanted to just give you a shout out and recognize all the listeners that have come from Overcast. Thank you for following the show. This conversation, I'm talking with Lee Valley, and Lee is a transformation coach, and he specializes in fear, phobia, and anxiety, and he works with children and adults, and he helps people transform their thinking so that they can get more comfortable in their skin, and by doing that, we can be more successful at or more effective at anything we do in life. I mean, sure, we talk about health and wellness in this episode, but this is one of those conversations that transcends health and wellness alone, because it really crosses over into the personal development arena. And this episode's a little bit longer than usual. It's a little over an hour conversation, but I encourage you to listen to the whole thing because there's some really good content in here. Lee really brings it, and Lee and myself, we had a really good connection going in this episode, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. So let's jump into my conversation with Lee Valley. Today we have on the show Lee Valley. Lee has been a transformation coach for over 20 years. He specializes in phobia cures and anxieties. He and his wife are the creators of Shift Happens for Teens, a groundbreaking program that teaches kids proficient stress management. Lee, welcome to Natural Health Matters.
Thank you, David. I'm so pleased to be here. This is great fun.
Well, it's a pleasure to meet you, Lee, and I think your expertise just really fits in so well to the whole message of Natural Health Matters, which is we maximize our health potential when we align our lives more fully with God's natural design for spirit, mind, and body. And you're basically, fitting into that mindset realm, and you help people with their thought lives, which I think is super intriguing. So give the Natural Nation, the audience, just a 35,000-foot view of what you do today.
Well, the most important thing that I feel that I do is help people be comfortable in their skin. And that's simply because that is what I suffered from my entire life. And I feel that the more people are comfortable in their own skin, the more authentic they are, the more purposeful they are, the more connection they have with everything.
Yeah. If you're going through life not comfortable and you feel that angst and that little knot in your stomach, I think you miss out on a lot of life. I think there's a lot of joy and a lot of relational connection that you could be missing out on. Would you agree with that?
Oh, totally. I mean, I missed out on most of my life, I think. I was so focused on trying to be somebody or trying to be something that I was never myself. And it sounds so sort of, you hear it as a cliche, but it's so true, isn't it? That when we are ourselves, everything tends to fall into place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'd like to ask everybody this that comes on the show. You already mentioned it, but I'd like to go a little deeper on how did you come to the realization that this is a field that you wanted to explore more? Can you go a little deeper into that for us?
Yeah, well, originally it was an exploration for self, but it certainly wasn't something I expected to do for a living, so to speak. When I was young, I was so insecure. It was ridiculous. People thought I was autistic because I found it so difficult to speak one-on-one, let alone in a group. And the beauty of that, in a sense, I created a huge amount of limiting beliefs, of course. However, the positive side, this is the spirit, right? This is the spirit within. There was a feeling of, I can fix this. And this created this journey, if you like, from the age of 14, I would say, but maybe even earlier than that. I started this journey of of understanding what was going on so that I could fix it. And for decades, we were just talking about age. I've been on the planet for quite a while now. And for
Uh-huh.
decades, I was looking at how to fix myself. The
Mm.
irony of that is that I never did, simply because I didn't need fixing.
Wow, that's deep. So let's talk about that. So what does it mean that you don't need fixing? Because I think most people would say, yeah, there's some areas in my life I'd love to fix. So what does that mean?
Oh my gosh, I mean, that's the ultimate key, I would say, because I give the analogy. Imagine, you might have heard of this. We're a diamond. We're all a diamond in the rough. It's been said many times. But do we really believe that? We're being taught that you can't do this, or you must be better at this, or you're not good at this. I
Yeah.
love there was a study where they asked, these young kids, like 3, 4 years old, are you a great painter or a great artist? And almost every hand went up. That's,
Say yes. Yeah.
yeah, because there was no baggage there. There was nothing telling them that they couldn't be a great artist.
Right.
Then at the age of 7, it was around about 60% put their hands up. So that's almost half of them starting to
Mm.
think they weren't artists. When they got to teenage years, it was like 1 or 2 out of the entire amount. So it was something, I can't remember the exact figure, but it was something like maybe 8%.
Mm.
And that's simply learned behavior. And that's what was
Right.
happening with me. I was broken in my eyes. So, I did all the right things. I learned all the right things. I learned communication, which was the biggest drawback for me. I learned all about body language. And again, being in that limiting belief environment, I tend to be pretty good at body language, simply because, we have that sort of safety mechanism. So we notice
Right.
what's going on. And so I was somewhat drawn to that in a sense, because basically I'd already got a natural sort of ability to do that. As the time went on, though, I realized we all have that ability. We all have that. I've never spoken to a person and worked with a person who I've said, are you okay in just general communication? Just general. Like, can you have a conversation with a person you're familiar with, or a person you feel comfortable with? I've never had a person who cannot do that.
Right.
Once I realized that, this was just in myself, let alone the people I've worked with. Once I understood that, I realized that's not the problem. That's not the cause. That's the symptom. I wanted to get to that cause. I wanted to get to what it was that was holding me back. And what it
So in
was
other
is,
words, let me make sure I'm understanding you, Lee. So
yeah,
if you're capable of having a conversation one on one with someone you know well and you feel comfortable around, that means that you possess the skill. The skill
that's
is
right.
there. You have the
Yeah.
ability. But then if you get tied up when there's 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people in the room, there's something blocking that ability that you already have. Is that correct?
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
exactly it.
So as a practitioner, when I had my office, I would teach people, and I teach people today, and that is that the body is wired for health. Our default setting is health. We don't have to teach our cells how to do their jobs. They already know how to do that. As a practitioner, it's my job to help identify the obstacles that are getting in the way of your body and your cells and your organs and systems doing what they already know how to do, and that is to thrive. So you're taking that same concept and taking it to I guess your thought life and your relational connections, is that, and your social situations. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's it. It's health, wealth, happiness. I mean, any area of life. My main study was on phobias and anxiety,
Yeah.
and people would come to me, and many people have asked me, well, what's the weirdest phobia, or what's the what kind of phobias can you deal with? And to me, the content is not important. So whether it wasn't me personally, it was my colleague had a phobia of ketchup. And can you imagine that? In a supermarket, they would have to be aware, and just in case some ketchup jumped out on them.
Wow.
And it sounds crazy, but that is the key. It is an irrational fear. It's an irrational fear is a phobia. And well, social anxiety is also an irrational fear. Now you might say, well, that might not be very nice, but it's still an irrational fear when we go into that anxious state.
Yeah. Well, I just to illustrate that point as well, is I used to be in a Toastmasters group, and there was a guy in the group. His name was Steve Siebold, and he's a mental toughness coach, and he's a keynote speaker. He gets paid by big corporations to speak at their annual meetings. Companies like Toyota or General Motors and Motorola, those kinds of companies will hire him to speak. And he was in our Toastmasters group. It was a real amazing blessing to have this guy at that caliber in our Toastmasters group. And I was working on getting up in front of an audience and being more comfortable. I could do it, but I didn't feel really at ease. And one day, Steve said, I want you guys to understand, you guys and gals, that when you get up in front of an audience, there's no real danger here. What's the absolute worst thing that could happen? Somebody throws a tomato at you, right? I mean, that's about it. There's no real physical danger here. So why are you allowing that stress response, this fight or flight reflex, is designed to respond to danger, to take over? It shouldn't happen that way. And just that really helped me a lot.
It's fantastic. Yeah, that's almost the crux of what I teach. I tend to use like a traffic light. So if you visualize a traffic light and use it as a visual representation of what's going on internally. And I love what you've said there, because like when we're in the red, and we all get in the red,
Right.
But this is the crazy thing is when we're in the red, we are crazy. Simply because the definition of insanity, I know they're doing the same thing, is one popular one, but the clinical definition is not of right mind. And when we're in the red, we are not of right mind. So what's happened is, as you know, of course, that an external trigger of some description, it could be anything. If somebody cut you up in traffic and it startled you a little bit, that's an external trigger that's created an internal response, the fight or flight, as you said. And from my point of view, and I think you've experienced this yourself, a social event maybe, a social situation can create this fight or flight feeling internally.
Yes.
But when this fight or flight is activated, it shuts off any external or any unnecessary actions in the body, like our logical mind. So there we are, activating this red and trying to make sense of a situation when our body is focused on one thing. It's focused on that imminent danger. And it has blocked out absolutely anything else. This is why it makes sense when we're out of it, why we would be so obsessed with something that other people think, well, what's the problem? Why are you getting so upset? They don't understand, and you don't understand. This is why we feel like it's something outside of us. It's out of our control, because in a sense we are out of control in that feeling. But when we go into the yellow, now the logical minds come in. But what I loved what you said is our innate well-being is there, isn't it? Our health, our natural health. That's our natural state, and that's the green. That's like the zone, or the flow. I think of it as a green river. You imagine this green river flowing, and the yellow and the red are the blocks to our natural well-being, our natural state. And I use that very good. And so I love what you said. You sort of highlighted all of those areas there.
Well, I want to go back to what you said about when you're in that state, that jacked up state, you block out all the unnecessary stimuli, and the mind is focused on one thing: this danger. And again, getting back to my flight instructor days, I was an airline pilot for 35 years, but my early days, I was a flight instructor in little 2-seat Cessnas. And we would teach students how to do slow flight. And you would bring the airplane slow enough to where the wind, the airflow over the top of the wing stops to flow right, and it gets disrupted. We call it a stall. The wing stalls. And when that happens, the airplane starts to drop. And you've got to have some altitude in order to recover. And it's fine if you're doing it at 3,000 or 4,000 feet. But if you do that down at low altitude, it can be fatal. So there was a lot of these slow speed, stall spin accidents. And the FAA went to the manufacturers of the aircraft and said, we need to put a warning horn in that alerts the pilot as to when they're getting too slow. And they said, we're going to save all kinds of lives. We'll probably put an end to these stall spin accidents. Well, they put the warning horns in, and these horns are loud because the airplanes themselves are loud, and the horns are really loud. And they found that the horn didn't slow those accident rates down at all, because there were just as many after the horns were installed, because the person that did that was in such a state of mind that everything was blocked out. They didn't even hear the horn. It didn't help. So I just wanted to throw that out there is that red state that you just mentioned, it's real. I've seen it in the flight instructing environment, and I think it can happen to just about anybody. It happens when you drive in a car. It happens in a lot of situations. But anyway, I love this green light, yellow light, red light, metaphor that you use. It's very, very intuitive, and it can help people. So if someone comes to you and they're dealing with anxiety, let's say they're having panic attacks for what seems to be out of the blue. What would you do with that person? How would you start the process of correcting that or helping that person?
Yeah, well, that's the most important thing. Again, if somebody's having a panic attack, that's a different story. Because, like I say, when we're having a panic attack, we are in the red. So we're not of right mind. So, I liken it, seeing the films. It's funny you saying about the film that came to mind was Airplane. I know that's years ago. And
great movie.
And somebody was having a panic attack, and they had a whole line of people slapping them and hitting them with a hockey stick. It was just crazy. And that's what came to mind, to snap out of it. But that's what we literally do. We metaphorically need to slap ourselves out of it, metaphorically. And what I tend to do, this is if I'm explaining a panic attack, what we need to do is in advance. It's almost like learning dance moves or learning how to fly a plane. You don't read a manual on how to fly a plane and then, oh great, I can do it, no problem. No, you need the experience. You practice. Yes. So you need to practice in advance so that you've got a knee-jerk reaction to get you out of that red state. Because as soon as you realize you're in the red state, that will drop you out of it. So a knee-jerk reaction. So what I tend to do is imagine a big red stop sign. So there we go. That's the red traffic light, right? You imagine a big red stop sign in your mind. And you can even, and this is the beauty of the mind, you can even shout, stop, in your mind. If you're on your own, you could even shout it, right? The more stimulus response you get, the more stimulus you get in your body, the more you're going to get that knee-jerk reaction to snap out of it. Now you're in the yellow. Now, as I say, your logical mind's coming back. So now you can start to, I think I can give you thousands of different exercises and all work at some point, right? You could listen to music that could snap you out of it. You could go talk to a friend that could snap you out of it. The point is that when you start realizing where your experience is coming from, now you can choose in the moment. You can be, as you said, intuitively responsive. So I would say a blanket exercise is breathing, because that's the connection from fight or flight, as they say, sympathetic nervous system. So your fight or flight to your parasympathetic, which is your relaxation. This is the one that's going to calm you down. This is the one that's going to get you back to normality. So the military, and it's actually, somebody told me they're even teaching this in I think kindergarten or just slightly above that. And I thought, how fantastic to teach kids this. It's the box breathing. So I don't know if you've heard of that. It's
I have not.
You could say 4, 4, 4, 4. So you inhale for 4, you hold that breath for 4, you exhale for 4, and then you hold the out breath for 4. And you can do different levels. You can do 5, 5, 6, 6, whatever it is. But the 4, 4 seems to work. It's a box breathing. And it works on so many levels, because first of all, you're getting out of your head, because you're focused on the counting of the breath. So that allows you to get out of the crazy thoughts that's going on in your mind. Also, again, you're starting to regulate your breathing, and this is regulating and getting rid of those crazy chemicals that's going through your system in that fight or flight. Because you can intellectually think, I've activated my fight or flight, but it doesn't just instantly stop. You've got these chemicals going through your system.
Right.
So when you do this box breathing, that allows that to start to dissipate, gets rid of. Now you can calm down. When you calm down, the green takes care of itself. Just like you said, it is our innate well-being. We don't have to do anything to get there. What we have to do, but what we do is get ourselves out of the way so that we naturally just drop into that. And that's the most important thing, I think. When we start to understand where our experience is coming from, the tools, if you like, just start to appear. You know what? I could listen to music right now. You know what? I'm going to call a friend. You know what? I'm going to do some exercises that maybe I'd heard from or I learned from a therapist. All of these things come into effect because now you realize it's not the tool. The tool is just helping you get out of the way so that your true self, your natural well-being can come through.
That's really good stuff. I really appreciate you sharing that. I did a natural vision improvement program one time, and when I was about 40 years old, my vision started to deteriorate. I'm 60 now, and by the time I was about 44, I had 20/70 vision. And in order to pass my FAA flight physical, I had to have glasses with me. Well, I came across this vision improvement program. It's called the Bates Method, BATES, like the Bates Motel. And Dr. Bates he noticed something, that when people lost their glasses and they'd go a couple weeks without their glasses, and they'd come to him to get re-examined, their vision had improved naturally. And he said, wow, this is an interesting phenomenon. If these people are doing something by accident, why don't we figure out what it is they're doing and teach it to people, and they won't need their glasses? Well, I did this program, and I'm 60 years old now, and I have 20/20 vision. And I threw away my glasses, and I've never needed them again. And basically, people say, I guess it's eye exercises, right? No, it's not. It's the exact opposite of that. It's more like yoga for the eyes. It's more like relaxation techniques for the eyes. And the more you try to see clearly, the worse you're going to see, the fuzzier your vision's going to get. Yeah. If you can just relax and let those eye muscles, again, do what they already know how to do, and that is focus. You just let it happen naturally. You don't have to white knuckle your way into it. You just got to relax and let go, and let your eyes do what they already know how to do. And it's an amazing thing. I love, when I tell people that story, I get the funniest looks. They're like, there's no way that could be true. You must be wearing contacts. You must have got LASIK. No, I don't do any of that. I have naturally good vision. I can see up close, I can see distant, and I do it because I'm cooperating with my body's natural design. And I wanted to share that story because that's exactly what you're teaching people to do, is just to cooperate with what their body wants to do, get that parasympathetic dominance, and experience the peace and the calm that comes along with it.
Oh, I love that. And you know what? I got to make a note of the Bates method because I need to do that myself. I'm learning.
I'll put a link in the show notes for anybody that's interested in that. It's
Yes.
powerful stuff.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It really is.
And isn't it great that that's what I love about this, is that this conversation is that we're learning that we already have everything, and that's the beauty of. I studied for decades, as I said, and it was all about learning more, learning more, learning more. The latest technique or the latest tool or the latest idea of how to fix. And yet, just as you said, it's actually just getting out of our own way. It's actually relaxing. Yes. The more we can relax, the better our lives become. We've been taught to be a hard worker, and nothing wrong with the hard worker, but it gets in our mind that we have to work hard for everything. And that's the opposite in terms of being okay with self. Because when you're okay with yourself and you don't work at it, now in terms of skills, in terms of, it's like, I'm not saying an athlete can sit on the couch, visualizing, they do stuff. However, they're not doing stuff in order to break free of their insecurity. They're not doing stuff in order to build their self-esteem. They're doing stuff to improve their athletic skill. And It frees your mind so much, and your eyesight too, by the sounds of it, which is good for me, because I could definitely learn something from that.
Yeah. Well, I'm intrigued about the work that you're doing with kids, because I don't think there's a middle school age or even high school age kid that hasn't struggled with peer pressure, social anxiety in one way, shape, or form. So can you talk to us a little bit more about, share some of the details about what you're doing with kids, and maybe share a couple testimonies?
Yeah, I mean, the most important thing, again, is allowing them to be themselves. I worked with some tennis kids. They were very elite tennis kids on their way to Wimbledon. They were working toward that. And these kids became adults way before their time. They had so much pressure on themselves. They had a natural talent for tennis. And so they were phenomenal. I mean, I couldn't hit a serve back, 12-year-old kid, and he would destroy me, because their serve was so amazing. They were really elite players. And what happened was they unfortunately got into that stress, that competitive mindset, which you could argue is what they need. However, what happened was I worked with them simply on coming back to, why do you love tennis? What was it in you, And what happened was that they started to get that flow. They started to get in the zone. They no longer were looking at the scoreboard. And you think, well, you've got to look at the scoreboard. How do you know? Well, if you're playing at your best, why are you looking at the scoreboard? The answer is, to play at your best, to notice where the ball is, to be in the moment and to be loving it. When we started having those conversations, oh my gosh, they just came alive, It was so phenomenal. It's quite funny. I once was walking past, this is in England, I was walking past part of the tennis courts, and one of the kids that I was working with happened to be playing. It was just a pure coincidence. But he thought that I'd gone there to see him play. This is how the mind works, And as I approached him, I saw him, and he was huffing and he was puffing, and it was really getting in his head and everything. And I walked up. He saw me, and immediately he told me afterwards what had happened. He immediately dropped everything. He just dropped it all. He was going to lose that game. Now, again, you know what I'm saying. It wasn't me. I was a sort of catalyst. I was a trigger, for him to realize what was going on in his mind. As soon as he dropped all of that, he actually won the game. Now, the key is it didn't matter whether he won the game or not. The key was that he got dropped back into himself and felt comfortable. Once he felt comfortable, he was going to enjoy it. And if he won it, great. If he didn't, he did the best that he could. This was the beauty of it. And it really taught me, as it's the age-old thing, when you teach others, you sort of learn yourself. It really taught me to get out of my own way, because there I was, Mr., I know it all. I wasn't really like that, but, in a sense, I was teaching it, And yet they were teaching me constantly, because watching them thrive like that was just incredible. I saw the true kid come back, the true person.
So let me make sure I'm understanding this. So this kid was in a match. He saw you show up. You just happened to be there. But he thought, oh, Lee's here. Now I really need to perform because Lee's here. Is that right? And then he started getting in his head and he couldn't perform.
No, it was the opposite. What was happening was he was in his head before I got there.
Okay.
And I just happened to show up. But once he saw me, it triggered, just like an external trigger in any other, in maybe a negative response. It happened to be a trigger for him in a positive response. Because he got out of his head. He got out of it. He suddenly realized, by seeing me, he suddenly realized what he was doing to himself.
I see.
So this is the beauty of it. I didn't have this, I'm the teacher, you need to please me attitude with them. And that was the beautiful thing. We were sharing between us, like we were on a level playing field. And so I think that really helped, because if it was the teacher, like you say, he might have thought, oh, am I doing something wrong? Right, but what actually happened was, it was just a trigger for him to, I just let go. As soon as he let go, it all came to him. He had that skill. We all know that. We've got the skills for whatever we're doing in that moment. Yeah. And if we don't, we can get the skills,
There's a church my wife and I used to go to down in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. It's called Christ Fellowship. And the pastor at the time was Tom Mullins, and he's a former college football coach. And he used to talk quite a bit about having a relaxed confidence. And he said, all good athletes have a relaxed confidence. Go watch some videos of Michael Jordan playing. Go watch some videos of John McEnroe or Derek Jeter. And they all had a relaxed confidence, and that allowed them to perform at their best. The minute you get tied up in stress, you're not going to be performing at your peak. And that's very, very true. And if we want to perform in really anything in life, we've got to get into that zone, don't we?
Yeah. And isn't it great? In a sense, the athletes tend to give us a really clear vision of life, I feel, because that is the ultimate, to break through all challenges and to be at your ultimate, be at your best. Mm-hmm. And that's it. It's that relaxed. When you ask somebody who played their best, like you say, Michael Jordan, I heard a story about Michael Jordan, and now forgive me, I may not get the exact basketball facts right, because I'm from England, and I confess I have never even dribbled with a basketball. Isn't that terrible? But Michael Jordan was interviewed, and he won the main championship. That's what I say. I don't know what it was. And the interviewer said, what were you thinking? Because it looked like you were sort of gliding in air. It was like you were almost showing off at the key clutch moment when he put that winning score. Uh-huh. And he said, oh no. He said, I was so exhausted at that point that I had no choice but to just step back mentally and go back to my basic training. He said, and that's why it looked like, he said, I was doing that 1, 2, 3 swish. And he said, I just let myself do it. He said, I wasn't even there pretty much. I don't even know what I was thinking. It just happened.
Yeah.
And that's the zone, right? When we get
Yes.
out of our own way, our liver knows how to cleanse our blood. Our body knows what it's doing. Our learned behavior is already there. When we get out of our way, imagine that in a relationship.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, for
we get
sure.
out of our own way.
Yeah, absolutely. I just got a phone call and it's kind of distracted me. Came over the computer.
Okay.
I'm gonna put my do not disturb on. But anyway, I had a guest on the show not too long ago. His name was Cody Butler, and he talked about learning things, the learning process. See if I can get this right. He said there's basically 4 quadrants to the learning box, and the first quadrant would be unconscious incompetence, whereas you don't even know that you stink at this skill, right? And you're just not even aware of it, right? So you're unconscious incompetence. Then the next level, move over to the right, in the top of the box, the 4 quadrants, would be conscious incompetence. Now I know that I lack some skill, but I'm still incompetent at it. I don't know how to do it well. And then move from there would be conscious competence, where I can do the skill now, but I have to work hard at it. It's really, I need to focus. I need to, get all the distractions out of the way, turn the radio down, and really, really focus. I can do this well. And then the final quadrant would be unconscious competence, where it just happens, which is what you were just talking about with the Michael Jordan interview. And that is, it just sort of happens. It becomes our normal. It's our default setting now because we've learned it so well. It just happens naturally. And I can tell you from an airline pilot perspective, a lot of people ask me, Dave, did you ever have an emergency, or were you ever scared in an airplane? The truth of the matter is, yes, I was from time to time. Not day in, day out, but it happened. And when you have an emergency, like lose an engine with a bunch of passengers on board, you'd be surprised how quickly your training kicks in. You know what to do. You've been trained in this. And when you get the thing on the ground after the emergency is over, you say, wow, that was surprisingly easy, because it all worked. The training kicked in. And I think that you could ask a lot of guys that have been in that situation to tell you the same thing.
That's a perfect analogy for getting out of anxiety, isn't it? Because when you are you realize where your experience is coming from, and you've trained in advance, the stop sign or whatever it is, you know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Your natural awareness kicks in. Yeah, your training, if you like, kicks in. So you know that if I go down this path, it's not, and this is split second, right? You're not going in a whole conversation, but if you go down this path, it's not going to lead to a good place. If you go down this path, you know that you're going to be okay. Like that speaker said, you're not really in imminent danger. Now, in your case, you were in imminent danger.
Yeah.
However, your training was absolute importance, that you knew what to do in that situation. And the most important thing is, I mentioned the military using that 4-4-4-4. They talk about the elite military, well, any military, they talk about what we class as fear and what they class as fear. And their fear is what they would call, and I would argue the point is that it's pure fear. What we think of fear is actually worry, it's anxiety, it's a created fear, as opposed to a natural, instinctual fear. And there's many military guys who have talked about when they are in this imminent danger, that everything slows down. It's like time slows down. And there's no fear, or as in they're not thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? It's a complete opposite. Now, you remember when I said when we're in the red, our logical mind shuts down. Everything is and it's imminent danger. right?
Right.
Well, that means that we're shutting down the thoughts that go on in our heads. But when they go into a situation like that, their mind is completely open. So they're not looking at crazy thoughts, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? They're so specific. And what happens is they see everything around them in pure vision, absolute vision. They act in ways that they didn't know was possible because they've got absolute pure awareness all around them. And I would argue that that is our natural state. That is how we can be, dare I say, all the time. But I've yet to get there, I admit.
Right.
But
We're imperfect.
why can we not be like that? That their mind knew that this is a time not to mess around. Just like you've said, in that sense, your natural training kicks in. They survey the area. They know exactly what's going on. They couldn't possibly do that in their regular daytime way of thinking. It's they would call it superhuman, and I would call it actually our natural state, our natural way of being.
Right. So, a couple points. You said that we create the environment that triggers the stress response. So, if we can create it, then we can uncreate it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what you were saying there. And I've got to be thinking that somebody listening right now might say, okay, Dave spent 35 years as an airline pilot. He's got a lot of experience. He was able to rise to the occasion during that emergency. This guy in the military, same thing. Boatloads of training. This is what he's trained for. This is what he lives for. Those men and women can step up when they need to. But what about little old me? What about me when I'm having this anxious day at work? What about when I'm dreading the presentation that I have to do tomorrow morning? What would you say to that person? How can they take some simple steps or some low-hanging fruit that could help that person to make it, for the average person?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's the key, is when you understand that your innate well-being is beyond belief. Yes, they've had that training, but your natural intuitive state has everything that you've ever learned in your entire life. That's what they say, whoever they are, right? That our subconscious mind or our unconscious mind is a memory bank. So without realizing, we have so much potential, so much knowledge. So let's say we're in that situation. If we were comfortable, if the person, you were comfortable in your own skin in that moment, you would know what the best thing for you to do is in that moment at whatever skill level you are. So this is why I say to people, listen, there's a difference between self-esteem and confidence, right? I have self-esteem. I'm confident in myself. I am not confident as a rocket scientist. I don't know how to build a rocket. I know a rocket scientist. I could ask him, but I don't know how to build a rocket. So that's not where my confidence is. But when I can be confident just in me, in myself, I'm going to do the best that I can do in that moment. There is never a time, in my opinion, and as far as I know, let's say, because there's always an exception to the rule, I don't believe there's ever a time that we need to be in the red. It never serves. As I just said, our natural state keeps us safe. It keeps us much safer than being in the red, being at high alert, being consciously, scared of the environment. Because when you're in the red, you're not receptive to the area. So in a simple thing like, you've got your boss calls you in, the heart starts going. Now, the best thing you can possibly do, instead of yes, you might need to get your your documents in order or something like that to bring with you. Yeah. But the best thing you can possibly do is drop out of that red, drop even out of the yellow, get the yellow and red blocks out of your green river, your natural innate well-being. Breathe and just relax. And the more you can breathe and relax, even when you're going to have the conversation, you just keep breathing and relaxing, breathing and relaxing, breathing and relaxing. What happens is, I use the analogy, you imagine a shaken snow globe, right? Imagine the snow as the thoughts that are going on in our heads, right? A shaken snow globe. And a lot of us spend a lot of our time like that, right?
Right.
Well, I always say is, you don't need more thoughts in there. There's enough. There's plenty in there. Trying to think a better option or a better this or that's actually going to make it worse. Tony Robbins always said a great analogy. He said, imagine your mind or your thoughts or your way of thinking as 1, 2, 3, many. So once you've got more than 3 things that you're thinking, you're in overwhelm, you're in overload, you're stressed. That's when you'll be anxious, that sort of thing. So the less you can think in a moment, and more you can trust your intuition. When your intuition comes through, that's when you're going to do the right thing. That's when you're going to say the right thing. That's when you're just going to be comfortable in that environment as much as possible. See, I'm not comfortable necessarily in a situation or comfortable with the situation, but I can always be comfortable in my own skin. And that's a massive turnaround. I used to look the other way. I used to be constantly looking out there to try and fix everything so that I would be comfortable. And what I've realized is the more comfortable I am in myself, the more the environment almost takes care of itself. So that was a long-winded answer to, but the key I think is really that relaxation. It's just constantly realizing what's going on.
Right. So in other words, if we get our thought lives right, then the external environment kind of will fade off into the background. It'll become less important to us. And we just simply are present in the moment with our thoughts, with the 2 or 3 thoughts, as Tony Robbins suggested, that we can focus on. And the rest of them just kind of fade off into the background. And we're not going to be so preoccupied trying to think of these 100 thoughts at the same time, which will overwhelm anybody.
Absolutely.
Right? So another thing that I'm not quite clear on, Lee, is I understand the red zone, which is that fear, panicked zone where we've lost our ability to focus. We're shutting stimuli down out of necessity. And I understand the green zone where we're in peace and we're just coasting and it feels great and it feels natural. But the yellow zone, I'm a little fuzzy on. What is the yellow zone?
Yeah, well, the yellow is that neutral point. It's most of us in the Western world certainly tend to spend our lives in red yellow. So the yellow is almost bordering toward red. It's almost like our go-to. And very few of us live in the yellow green, which is predominantly going into that awareness, from the yellow. So it's that borderline between the red and the green. These are the both extremes. So the green is that zone that, the red is chaos, you could say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The yellow is where we can make the difference. The yellow is where we can take control, where our conscious awareness is. Now, when we're in the green, the conscious awareness is there, but it's in the background. It's as I said, Michael Jordan wasn't really thinking what to do. It was almost like his body took over what to do. And when we're in the red, we're still not, because we've got this chaos going on. But when we're in the yellow, our conscious mind is here, and this is where we can use our memory, our learning, our the conscious competence, of learning different things that will improve our lives. I mean, we talked about having faith. That's where our faith is, because when we're in the green, we are naturally tapped in. we're naturally at one, you know.
Hmm.
When we're in the red, we are completely disconnected, in
Yeah.
my opinion.
Well, my faith really governs a lot of what I do. And I'm just thinking about the Bible verse, Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So the assumption
Beautiful.
there is that we're all conformed to the pattern of the world at some point. And what God
Yeah.
wants from us is to help us to become transformed and to change our mental approach, change our minds into a more productive fashion, which is really what this whole conversation has been about, right? That
Yeah.
we actually do have agency. We have, many people would call it free will, and we don't have to be victims of the thoughts that come our way. We're the ones in charge. I think of the medical approach, and I think you might agree with this. Let me know if you don't. We can talk about it some more. But in the psychology field, it's very common to think that thoughts originate in the brain. And I would disagree with that because the brain is an organ, and my mind, my consciousness as a human being, my agency is in charge of that. I can tell my brain what to do, and my brain will send signals to my body. If I want to hold up two fingers, that thought started in my mind. And then I sent that thought to the brain sent the signals to the body. And I would suggest that to buy into the idea that the brain is in charge, it's kind of flip-flopped. It's looking at things upside down. We're the ones in charge. We get to make our choices. And when you listen to somebody like Lee and you realize, hey, maybe I've just been by default making some wrong choices. Maybe I need to be transformed by the renewing of my mind and learn a more productive way of thinking about these stressful events in my life. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it's a perfect analogy of the traffic light, because the traffic light is pointing us back within rather than conforming to that lifestyle and so on that we normally see outside of us. And
Yeah.
yes, that's I love that quote there. That was phenomenal. I
Yeah,
must
Romans 12:2. Yeah.
Romans 12:2. I'll write that down.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot from this, I tell you. Um, yeah. So the beauty of this is looking within, and it sounds quite sort of esoterical, but it's the opposite of what we've been taught, isn't it? We
Yeah.
tend to look outside of us. We tend to look at what's going on and determine how we're feeling as a consequence, rather than looking at how we're feeling and creating the feeling that we want, or to have, or the truth. What is the truth? That when we look big picture, you mentioned the Bates method. I tend to give another exercise, which is, imagine you're looking. So we're looking through our eyes, but imagine just looking behind the eyes. And again, you say, how can I look behind the eyes? But what this does is it gives you a sense of that softness. You're softening the gaze. Now, you tend to see more of life. You tend to take in life, because you're no longer here in the brain, as you say. You're actually tapping into something before that, something so much bigger than that.
Yes.
And I would say the true self.
Yes.
And as you say, it's there's something so magical, and we haven't really spoken about that, but there's this connection, isn't there? That's what I believe, is that the yellow gives us that opportunity to change our thinking, get out of our thinking, so that we can really be a vessel, so that we can really actually have our connection there. And
So we can thrive.
so we can thrive. And it's just amazing that it's almost like we have this GPS, right? This is our intuition, our inspiration. We have this GPS internally. And this is the ultimate GPS. This is up to date. It is the best you could possibly get. and yet we determined to keep using the map of 1985, in my case, using this old map, which is through our thinking, through our memories and so on.
Right.
There's a magic to what we've learned, but the learning is there. It's through our intuition. I tend to use this analogy, and it's just a personal opinion. I think of intuition as us, as coming from us, from all our learned behaviors, or all our information, our knowledge, all the things that we've gained throughout our lives, which is a huge, huge, huge amount. And then I think of inspiration as we could say it's coming from God. It's original thought.
Yes.
That's our true. That's
Yeah.
when we are truly connected.
Well,
When we
again,
feel
that's
that
that's very,
inspiration.
very biblical. The Bible has a lot of truth to apply practically to our lives. And Jesus was teaching the disciples that he was going to soon go away. He was going to be crucified, and he said, "It's actually a good thing that I go away, because then the Spirit will come, and he will lead you into all truth." The Comforter, he called him. And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to here. Is that you can call it intuition, you can call it the self. Freud would call it the psyche.
Yeah.
But it's that connection to God, and it's the Holy Spirit living inside of us if we have that personal relationship with Him, and He will inspire us to be our best, because God wants us to be peak performers. He wants
Yeah.
us to be all the men and women He created us to be. He doesn't like to see, like any parent would. He doesn't want to see us held back by false beliefs and allowing these stressful thoughts to ruin our days and run our lives. No, He wants us to be in charge, and He wants us to experience all the love, joy, and peace that we're capable of experiencing. So I think that very, very much lines up. What you're saying is very much lines up with Scripture all the way.
Yeah. I love
So
that.
I wanted to ask you, before we wrap things up, you have a book coming out. It's called Kick the BS Out of Social Anxiety. So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about your book.
Well, the BS, actually, I've actually changed it. It's even worse
Okay.
now. I use BS as belief systems. So that's kick
Okay.
the belief systems out of social anxiety, because
I
when
like
we
it.
get rid of all that stuff, then we become ourselves. We see it for what it is. It's a social event. It might not even be a nice social event, but you don't have to suffer. You don't have to get in your head and have all that craziness. But I've actually changed it to kick the out of social anxiety.
Okay.
A little controversial, I know. However,
Okay.
there is a big reason for it, because we are the diamond. We've established that we've been created in His image. So
Right.
we are perfect in ourselves. We are perfectly ourselves. So metaphorically, I use the diamond. It cannot be tarnished. It cannot be stained. It cannot be broken. Metaphorically, it is a perfect self. You do not need to improve upon yourself. That takes a lot of weight off of you. The downside is our diamond is covered in poop, basically.
Right. Right.
What's the poop? It's the belief systems. It's the limiting belief systems. It's the doubts, the fears, the constant thinking and negative type of way of thinking.
Right. The
that builds up.
comparisons.
The comparisons, the peer groups that might not have been in a good way. Our parents, teachers, for whatever reason, how we interpreted it has created a limiting belief and a limiting self. So all this stuff is all around us. So that's why I'm saying kick it away, kick it out of your existence. Now, you never get rid of it, because just like when we eat, it builds up. And you can't go to the toilet once and think, well, that's it, I'm done, right? It's the
Right.
same with ourselves. We just keep clearing, eliminating the stuff around ourselves, just so that our diamond can shine. But what happens is we're taught that or rather we make this assumption, but it tends to be that we're taught that we are that stuff. That is us. That's the broken self, right? That's our sins and our problems and our weaknesses and all these things that we believe that we are. No, it's just the poop around our diamond. But unfortunately, what we do is we paint over it. So we paint a simulated diamond. And that simulated diamond is things like, now hear me out, the paint itself isn't bad, it's just why we're doing it. So motivation, you can do it. Again, nothing wrong with it, but we can use that because we think that we don't have it in ourselves. So things like plastic surgery, things like trying to be the best at everything, being super competitive. Again, nothing wrong with these things as long as that you're doing them for the right reasons. When you're doing these things to try to pretend you're somebody that you're not, then it's the paint that's covering this stuff and you never see your diamond. A lot of people never even get to see their diamond. So the more we can understand that this is the poop, we get rid of it. It's not good for you. How do you do that? Breathing, understanding what it is, just letting go, all sorts of techniques that you can do.
Yeah.
But it's not about
I have a PDF that I created. I mentioned this in my book, The Christian's Guide to Holistic Health, but there's a chapter in there on limiting beliefs, and I created a PDF that I'm going to make available in the show notes. People can download it for free. But anyway, I call it the ABCDE method of identifying and correcting unhealthy thinking patterns. And A stands for activating event. B is the belief system or the thought life that surrounds that event. C is the consequences of believing and thinking that way. D stands for disputing those beliefs. And then E stands for the energy shift when you find the way to conquer those beliefs and put yourself back in charge. So I have a one-page PDF. It's simple, but it's really, really powerful if you use it. It's something very powerful about writing those thoughts down. When you have these thoughts up in your head, somehow they get clouded and it doesn't quite seem tangible. But when you create that tangible act of writing it down, maybe even speaking it out loud that you haven't done in maybe years, you're engaging some of your other senses, and there's something very, very powerful about that. So I'll make that link available in the show notes for sure.
Oh, that's fantastic. And what I love about that is because you're separating yourself from it. Because
That's right.
like I said, you're not believing anymore that this is you. It's a belief. It's not you. It's separate from you. It's a creation that isn't serving you. So that's fantastic. Like you say, it's very rare that we'd speak these things out. We just assume that they're real because they're almost in our unconscious, right? So that's fantastic. Yeah. And the beauty of, like I say, the paint is not bad. The motivation's not bad. The thing, like I joke that positive thinking can be bad for your health because positive thinking is still thinking, right? And I'm saying can be. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying it can be. You imagine if you're in a crazy state. Now, if you've got all these thoughts in your head, well, you cannot change a thought. You cannot change a thought. You can create a new thought, but you cannot change a thought. It's like this table is made of wood. I can't change it back to a tree. It's already a table. But I can have new thought. How do you get new thought? This is our natural state. And most people think that their natural state might be negative. But no, that's our learned behavior becomes negative because we're in high alert, as in to keep ourselves safe. But in actual fact, our natural state is positive. So you don't have to try to force positive thinking. You just get out of your own way and you will feel that, as you said, that love, that joy, compassion for self and for others.
Yes.
You'll feel all of those beautiful feelings without even having to force them.
Yeah. Well, that's a really a beautiful thought right there. And another Bible verse that's coming to mind is 2 Corinthians 10:5. We are taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. So we have that ability. We have ability to take those thoughts captive. We'll ask ourselves, is this thought serving me? Is this belief serving me? Is it serving my health building efforts? Is it serving my relational connectedness with other people? If not, it needs to go, right? So, I love it. This is great stuff, Lee. I really appreciate all the wisdom you shared. Wrapping things up, what would you say is the most important thing you'd like to leave people with today?
The most important thing is for sure to understand that you're the diamond, so that you are coming from that. You are coming from that no matter what the situation. You know, we catastrophize life so much, a lot of us. And the more we can be separate from that, the more we can take away that attachment to all things. You know, somebody says something, we attach to that. If we can just detach, and I'm not talking about being different, I'm talking about just detaching from the situation, people, places, things. You can still love a person and be detached from the situations. This will give us the most amazing relationships with God, with ourselves, and with others. This will give us everything that we really desire, I believe. So the more we can understand that, come from self, be comfortable in your own skin, the more you'll find that life starts unfolding a lot differently and a lot better and a lot easier, I would believe.
That's great. Love it. So, Lee, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what's the easiest way to do that?
Well, the website is www.shifthappens.global. We didn't want to do, just a .com. We want to be global.
Okay, but, and that's SHIFT. Shift Happens.
Yes, Shift Happens. So we love to play on words,
Yes.
I'm old school, so I'm on Facebook. You can always reach me on Facebook, Leave a Lily, right. Or you can Shift Happens. We're Shift Happens on Instagram, So
okay. All right. That sounds great. And when is your book coming out?
The book is, hopefully, as long as I get it all together, in February. It will be out in February.
Okay. Yeah. So this, right now, it's actually November, and this episode is probably going to go live somewhere near February. So maybe it might even be available by the time this goes live. So that'll be great.
Oh, fantastic. Yes.
Lee, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with the Natural Nation today. Really enjoyed it.
Oh, it's been, I've learned as much from you. I've really appreciated your wisdom too.
For more, go to the show notes page at davidsandstrom.com/107. There you can find links to all the resources that we mentioned. And remember, I'm going to make available that PDF to identify and correct unhealthy thinking patterns, the ABCDE method. It's a really convenient checklist, or it's a PDF. So you can grab that there. There's also a full transcript with timestamps that's downloadable for free. And there's also a video version of the show there as well. If you're enjoying this content, I sure would appreciate you telling a friend about it. The content that I curate for you and that we bring on this show is relatively hard to come by. And if you have a friend that you think may enjoy this content as well, I sure would appreciate you telling them about it. The number one way someone finds out about a new show is a friend tells them. So I sure would appreciate you sharing the good news. That's it for now. Thank you for listening. I'll talk with you in a couple of weeks. Be blessed.